Hi, I'm Jay from Real Street Performance.
What's up, guys? Pedro, Baltic Supra Racing.
Today we are looking at the engine that Pedro heard at FL2K 2022. There's a hole in the cylinder head now that wasn't there before, and
yeah,
Pedro's going to tell us how it happened.
It all happened
really
so
quickly.
fast. So fast. All right, so guys, here's the play-by-play. This happened last week. I didn't post nothing about it because I wanted to tear into the car, and I did that in a hurry. Got back from Florida 2K, pulled the motor, brought it right to my 2JZ doctor as soon as I could. Now that he's torn into it and I'm looking at how bad it is, we can disclose how I believe this was caused. Here on the table, we have a demonstration of turbo sizes. One that should not belong on a Supra, one that I ran for a long time, and the guy who caused this damage.
Well, cause may be the wrong word.
So anyhow.
Partner in crime.
In an effort to go faster. Jay's been helping me for many years now, and it's never been enough. I was sharing not long ago that I remember wanting to build this car to a point where it would scare me. I wanted more and more. Now I'm searching for sixes, and the only reason I'm doing that is I've already gone to 730. Setting a goal for anything less than 699 would have been silly. So regardless of how difficult it becomes to get there, I'm willing to do my best, but I have to be better at learning from the master. I kind of like piecing combinations together on my own. And if I succeed, it feels great. If I don't succeed, now that I know the expenses, it doesn't feel great. So I'll do better at asking for advice.
This is only his first time with this level of problem.
I've never had any carnage.
Right.
We tear into motors just to see how things are living,
yeah,
and we piece them back together. I've never heard an engine. I've never heard a turbo. I did all of it this time around.
But this is when you want to move to this level, but you don't have the components or the knowledge. And I don't mean that negatively.
No, it's perfectly fine. I'm learning on the job.
For me, I've gone through this before. Yeah. So part of my experience with going sixes with the janitor was learning these things. And I had at one point installed a 108 millimeter turbine on that car, and I experienced this misery, and I didn't want anything to do with it again. So I went back to the 103, which was quite a bit easier to race, but nothing like an 85 millimeter turbine. An 85 millimeter turbine.
Yeah, we had that one figured out.
Little tiny bit of nitrous, the thing's alive and ready to race. And when you're dealing with large turbines with small engines, you're operating the engine at a very low speed with a fair amount of nitrous. So how the engine will manage stress at 8,000 RPM is quite a bit different at 3,000 RPM. And when you kind of hold the engine at one engine speed below camshaft efficiency, you know, it's just, there's a lot of mess going on at low speed. And then to make matters worse, if the engine can accelerate up against the torque converter and get enough exhaust mass leaving the engine that you can build positive pressure in the intake manifold, you basically have this crosstalk where the engine is not headed in the right direction, and it can get tripped up and a cylinder can lose control. And when you're dealing with nitrous, it could happen relatively quick. And I've felt
my problem.
This feeling before in the pits, spooling the car, and it is extremely violent. So we have the head off, and that's that part of the damage. We are going to pull the number 2 piston out and take a look at it. There's some topical damage from where the valve seat was being jammed into the piston. But we don't know what the small end of the connecting rod, the rod bearing, or the pin boss looks like. So we're gonna take a look at those things. But for now, it's just a good illustration of an imbalance of parts. Because with this big turbine, you're really better suited to have a manual trans that you can have a lot of engine speed and some anti-lag, and then you bring the clutch in to move the car in motion. Well, with an automatic, you know, these racing automatic trans, you basically put the transmission to where it stops with the trans brakes. You're holding the car from moving forward, and you can fully load the engine. And you've listened to videos over the years of engines spooling the turbo, and some of them do it well, and some of them are pretty miserable. This is just an illustration of when miserable goes bad.
I agree.
Yeah?
I agree. It all happened so fast, man. The heat of competition, I wanted it to spool quicker. Like you mentioned earlier, I ran an 85 turbine wheel for a long time, and that comes onto power crazy fast. With my larger 108, in order to get it going, I went up in the nitrous earlier in the RPM to get the car onto the two-step. And I think that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, it really doesn't like it. I've never felt an engine shake the way they could shake when they're out of control at low speed. It's super violent. We hope to not do this again. We're gonna move to a 103 millimeter turbine, which is what we had raced on our car. And because of the IRS and other limitations, he'll have plenty of power on tap to achieve a 6-second run. We just wanna have the best responding turbo we can have in order to meet the goal. We talk about turbo lag and response a lot, and there's a certain amount of it that's just going to happen because of the nature of the beast. But you don't want to volunteer. We'd like not to have the exhaust back pressure, but if we can't get the turbo online, it's useless to us.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's take the pan off and pop that number 2 piston out and see.
Doesn't look great either.
No, it doesn't.
All right, so for this second piston, what are we trying to look for?
Well, we're gonna see.
What are we trying to avoid?
Or we're gonna see if there's anything in the cylinder that we can't see already,
Right.
because we can only go to the bottom dead center. And then we're gonna look at the piston pin boss on the connecting rod and the piston, because if this happened over a long enough time span, it can pound the connecting rod oblong, and it can it can flatten the rod bearing. It can do all kinds of fun stuff.
Yikes. It happened longer than it should have happened for.
Yeah.
I was saying earlier, I clicked second gear and I felt a loss of power. I felt the car break up a little bit. Silly me thought it might clear up and go away come third gear. And then before long, I could see the finish line. So I said, let me just hold it a little longer. And then it barely wanted to idle.
Oh yeah.
It was mad.
Well, the air's leaving, but so check this out. This is cool.
What you got?
The rod bearing, when the rod bearing, the detonation comes and it hammers the rod bearing. The rod bearing can get wider, and when it does that, it'll relax in the housing bore. So right now, when you move this bearing back and forth, the bearing has still got tension in the housing bore. Hear it tink out? It's got spring left in it. When you ruin this bearing, or it shakes a little bit more, you're gonna lose that right there, that tension. So the rod bearing hasn't folded up. So it happened relatively quickly. The other thing, before I took the piston out of the bore, I was moving the rod and piston together to see if there was any movement right there. So let's take a look at that pin bore and see if there's anything notable going on there. Pedro's just 5 minutes away from me telling him that I got a billet 3.2 sitting on a shelf over there ready to go home with him.
Which shelf is this? 'Cause we can
The one with all the engines that are completed on it.
We can make that happen, Jay. We'll have this be the backup.
Okay, the backup.
This could be our backup.
Yep.
And then that could be our number one.
Our ringer.
That'd be sweet.
Bottom dollar.
Dude, I'm hooked. You knew this would happen.
I know, I just don't want it I don't want it to happen like this.
Well,
I want you to be
I
like,
get that.
hey Jay, I think I'm gonna order a turbo, what should I get? And I would say, I would get an 85-103 because you're gonna have plenty of power on top.
Yeah.
And you're gonna be able to have reasonable response for the power you're trying to make.
Yeah. That would have been nice.
Would have been nice. Nah, man, it happened fast enough. It didn't. This rod's intact. You know, you could roll this pin on the flat board, or you can just put it back in.
Solid.
Yeah, they'll get real sticky when they bend. But these are trend pins. You know, we've said it before in videos. If you're dealing with a high horsepower engine that you know is going to have a high workload, the trend pins are through hardened. They're a really incredible material, and they're a very good investment if you're trying to do a high level of work with a relatively small engine like this. So they're expensive, But if you use a cheaper pin and you happen to bend or break it, everything's junk. So you have to balance that in your decisions. So that's cool, man. I think we're gonna explore this, get a replacement piston in the works. You've got a cylinder head that's been prepped.
Yep, we're ready.
I'm gonna have this block touch honed. The number 2 cylinder is not going to be perfect. You're gonna have more piston to wall clearance than you would like.
Right.
But there won't be any, it'll be noisier when it's cold. And for an engine like this, with the amount of time you have to get it to the starting line, if you listen to a lot of race engines cold, they're fairly noisy because the motor or engine doesn't get stabilized in temperature. You know, we wait in the lanes, we talk to each other, you know, it's time to run, you fire the car up, and chances are the car is not up to temp. And nor would you want to leave the starting line at 200 degrees because then you may be 250 degrees out the door because you're pouring all this heat into the engine. So you start with a relatively low engine temp. So having large amounts of piston to wall clearance, it will be noisy and it will use more oil, but we have a race car to race, you know, so you accept some of the things.
And this was me playing it safe. I had nitrous pills all the way up to 400 shot.
Oh, it would have been a disaster. It would have literally been like
I have a little
mechanical diarrhea, components on the ground.
Yeah.
Done. You can't mess around.
Yeah.
That at a low engine speed like that.
No, I know that's
Man,
that's
it would
the true
be
damage there.
disastrous. It's just cycle time. So when you are turning the engine less RPM, the cycle time is longer. So it's under stress longer. It's no different than when you do a bicep curl and you move the bicep quickly or you move it like over 20 seconds. It's the same stress, just time under stress. It's nasty stuff.
All right, so you're thinking
piston, cylinder head,
Yep.
deck, block, hone block.
Yep.
Go to World Cup with a smaller turbo.
Yeah, something in the works.
Fantastic air that's
Yeah.
going to spool the turbo up and be very happy, where you can even come down. I would like to see you come down in nitrous.
That's the goal, yeah.
Make sure that you have control of your converter charge pressure. Make sure you're not making a tremendous amount of charge pressure because that'll cause the torque converter to be coupling harder than it could if it was leaking. So when you have a dump valve on your trans, you're just leaking fluid inside the trans and allowing it to slip more.
Right.
So we make sure you have good fluid management and that you don't have the engine trapped at a low engine speed with a bunch of nitrous flowing through it and there will be nowhere for it to run. It just sits there and dies. If you get to the point where you've put a combination together and you go to the racetrack and you time out because you can't get the turbocharger online and nothing breaks, like super good time to stop and rethink what you're up to because it shouldn't take that long if the parts are matched well or if something else is wrong. So anyhow.
You live and you learn. And I mentioned earlier, this was an expensive lesson, but...
Yeah. Well, we also have a head that you've been racing since 2016.
I agree.
So this head has served him well.
Yep.
Now it's time to get recycled.
Our oil pump bolts were hanging in there.
Yep.
Remember we had some back out last time?
Yeah.
We had some solid oil pressure this time around.
Yeah.
I wasn't accustomed to that.
That's cool. Well, until the oil gets hot, because again, we're drag racing.
Right.
If you were endurance racing, it gets different. But the other thing that you need to be aware of is oil temp. You know, ideally, especially at Maryland, get yourself a glue-on oil heater and glue it to the bottom of the oil pan with epoxy and keep it plugged in. Just keep it plugged in.
Wow. Because
the oil doesn't work when it's cold. And you could go up there and make enough pressure on some engines to blow an oil filter apart. And that's just what you can see happening. The thick oil not flowing through the engine, it doesn't work for the heat management. It doesn't work for lubrication. Cold oil is not your friend. Wow. So go ahead and you can get like these epoxy pads, glue it to the oil pan and just plug into the thing at the track. Because you want to keep your water temperatures, you know, say around 100 or 120, and keep your oil temperatures around, you know, at least 150, 160. Because if you go up to the lanes with no oil temp. You're gonna have 100-degree water temp, 70-degree oil temp, and the oil does not work well cold.
Wow. That's something to keep in mind, yeah. I wasn't thinking about that.
Plus, when the engine is off, you've got the oil plugged in, and you've got the breather cap off, or the system is open, it can vent. Cooking that oil, it cooks fuel out of the oil, because you have alcohol-based fuel. So you're gonna have the opportunity to have oil be diluted by alcohol. So you leave the oil heater plugged in, cooks the oil, keeps the oil clean. So what's the plan?
We're racing in 2 weeks.
Yes.
No excuses, no if, whens, or buts. I don't care if the piston is halfway loose. Just get a piston back in that hole and we're going back to the racetrack. I learned a bunch, man. I want to see this in person, see how bad it really was. Pick your brain. I wish I would have done it sooner than some of the decisions that I made. But ultimately, as we look at this together, my turbine wheel was too big. My AR was too large. In order to get the turbo spooled up, I was spraying more nitrous than ever before, earlier in the RPM than ever before. I love some of the stuff you just shared with me about just cams and the peak in where cams make power, and I probably can't explain it as good as you just did, but nonetheless, I was spraying too soon, the nitrous had nowhere to go, and it literally torched a hole through our head. I had been running this head for a very long time, so it was time for a fresh head regardless, but sad to see it go out this way. I would have loved to have kept it as maybe a backup head, but for now, it'll be some wall art in my garage. And that's it, man. We love what we do. I'm glad to have you on board. I'm excited to get back to the track, and we're definitely gonna make the changes to give myself the best possible chances and not have this happen again. It's gonna be an expensive repair.
Yeah. No, I don't like seeing repairs like this because I know it's avoidable, and I hate to see people face and or experience problems that I've already gone through the learning curve with. So it's part of our relationship is keeping each other out of trouble. So when you were doing things like that, I wish we would have voiced it, because I would have said, I've been there before.
No, I get it.
Yeah, but here we are, and we can get it fixed in time, and we can go to Maryland and have a phenomenal time. That event, year after year, really delivers, and it's a tremendous amount of fun for everyone, and I don't want to miss it, and I don't want to have you miss it. So we'll get it fixed.
You're the man. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.